welcome back to ESBL Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Danny and Elliot. We have had 24 hours or so since Canelo's defeating John Ryder out in Guadalajara over 12 rounds. Dominant performance by Canelo as he is about to turn 33 years old in his 63rd professional fight. One key theme that I think a lot of people are talking about is the amount of British fighters Canelo has beaten. We're now up to 8. I think finding a British fighter that can beat Canelo probably never going to happen if we're being honest. And I think it's rare that you've had one fighter beat so many fighters from one country without much response. Danny, Elliot, looking forward to this. Looking forward to having a few chairs thrown. Bit of a debate here. We're going to kind of have you've both provided us with a list of which fighters have kind of done best against Canelo. Basically, we've got some big names in British boxing there. Amir Khan, Callum Smith, some names from over 10 years ago as well. Looking forward to getting stuck into it. There's a fair amount to discuss, a few fights to discuss. So going to get straight into it. Danny, you're going to go first. Tell us your list from 8 to 1 of fighters you think have fared best against Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, cheers, mate. So number 8, Rocky Fielding. Don't think a great deal needs said on that, to be honest. 7, Callum Smith went in there, all the physical advantages in the world, and held on for a points decision. 6th, Ryan Rhodes. Showed a bit more ambition. Smith ultimately ended up getting stopped in the 12th. Then after that, Matthew Hatton, very similar fight to the Rhodes fight, but managed to hear the final bell. Now the sort of top 4, this is more fighters I would say had bits and pieces of actual success against Canelo. So Liam Smith caused Canelo a few problems, won a couple of rounds, gave him a pretty bad cut in the eye. 3rd, Billy Joe Saunders, won a couple of rounds. Debatable. I think at the time I thought was giving him 3 or 4, but on second viewing maybe only a couple, but ultimately quit on a stool. 2nd, Amir Khan, massively undersized, won the majority of the rounds against the fighter 2 weight classes above him before getting obviously stopped in a high round knockout. Then number 1, most recently, John Ryder. Don't need too much of a description in that, but give a really good account of himself. Won 3 rounds, maybe 4 if you're being really, really generous, and showed a lot of heart.
Yeah, good stuff. I'm not going to make any comment yet, but we're going to do the debating bit after Elliot provides his list. So I'm going to give the microphone to Elliot, who's gonna take us through his 8 fighters.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you, Danny. We're going to go. Okay, so I agree with Danny. First up, number 8, Rocky Fielding. Again, less is more when it comes to talking about Fielding's boxing career. Number 7, though, we're going big inversion. Amir Khan. Now I just look. We'll get into the debate obviously in a minute, but we saw what happened to Amir Khan. He's still in the shadow realm. Number 6, Liam Smith. Again, I feel like I agree with what Danny was saying. Actually, he did have obviously Canelo in trouble here and there, cut him, etc. Was down a couple of times though, and that's why I put him so low down in comparison to his brother Callum Smith, who is at 5. Completely agree with Danny as well there. A man with massive physical advantages. Frankly, should have equipped himself a lot better. Weight advantages, height and reach, and was still pushed back by someone significantly shorter than him, which anyone who knows from fighting in the playground, that is an unforgivable sin. Up to number 4, Ryan Rhodes. And I've got Ryan Rhodes high up here. And I know what Danny's saying about trying to survive, but Ryan Rhodes, the reason I've put these guys here is because Ryan Rhodes does nowhere near have the ability to trouble Canelo. Guy who was sort of European, British level, still did quite well. I think he had a couple of fights after that. So he's coming to the end of his career, 50 fights by the time he got to that point. That's a tough night for anyone, even though it's more of a natural weight. So I put him in at 4. Hatton at 3. Again, him and Rhodes could kind of be interchangeable for me, but it was just more to do with the fact that I think Hatton's, 17 KOs, whatever, in 43 fights, not powerful. Down at that was a light welter, I think, campaigning below where he fought Canelo. So again, just sitting duck really, managed to see the final bell. I don't blame him for trying to get to the final bell. I think that's considered success in some ways. Saunders up at 2. Like Danny said, there's some close rounds. I think the official judging was, I think 2 judges had it 6-2 to Canelo at the time. 1 had it 5-3. I thought he presented a bit of a different problem. And I don't necessarily criticize him for stopping, even though, you boxing fans, you want someone to get on the shield, but you're also sitting there thinking, does he want to be punched into blindness? I don't think so. And then, Ryder up at 1. Again, like Danny said, nothing needs said. We've seen enough about that fight, frankly. That's the attitude, though, the intent, the fact he could have sacked it after 5 rounds, had a broken nose, whatever, stayed on, saw the final bell and actually threw back. I think, to be honest with you, he's up here for me. And then the rest of the guys almost start down here. There's a massive gulf between how he equipped himself and the other guys. But that's my list, yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Looking forward to getting into it. I think two things that you both of you have in common is you put Rocky Fielding last and John Ryder first. Therefore, we're not really going to touch on it because there's not really a debate because you both agree. Just going to quickly swift through Danny's list. Danny Fielding at 8, Callum Smith at 7, Ryan Rose at 6, Matthew Hatton at 5, Liam Smith at 4, Saunders at 3, Amir Khan at 2, and Ryder at 1. Elliot, is there a name there that speaks out to you as something that you want to debate with Danny over out of that list?
I mean, I'm gonna have to. I mean, there's two I suppose that are standing out on there. There's Amir Khan and there's Callum Smith. In many ways, in a kind of inverted order to my own. Now, Amir Khan, don't get me wrong. I would agree with Danny, and you sit there and go, look, you've gone up 2 weight classes. You've done okay for parts of the fight, but I almost feel like it's a similar argument to me that when people were saying, you know, that Kell Brook did well against Triple G. Like, you can sit there and go, it means nothing. The man wasn't like, in a way, it's like if you're Canelo, you approach this is where I'm coming from with Canelo versus Smith. Canelo versus Smith versus Canelo versus Khan. You look at, I suppose, Khan's previous fights, you know that he's been stopped obviously by Danny Garcia, accusations being quite chinny. And I sit there and feel like you can give Khan the early rounds. You've got fast hands, you've lost that advantage. You can almost let him to have that because you know at some point when you catch him, it's going to be lights out. And when, you know, he dropped to his knees and essentially administers CPR himself, I just struggle to see how that, out of all those other fighters, is the second best performance against Canelo. Even though it's commendable going up 2 weights, but it just seemed like to me like a high profile fight for Canelo to just raise himself further, you know, to sort of boxing audiences, especially over here. And in a fairly relatively comparatively low risk fight for me.
Okay, I'm going to give Danny the right to respond here. Danny, so just to confirm, you've got Amir Khan at number 2. Eliot, you've got Amir Khan as low down as 7 here. Just, Danny, your response to Eliot there.
So I'll come back with a question. So how can you have Amir Khan second bottom and then Billy Joe Saunders second when Khan was genuinely up in the cards? Saunders fiddled his way to a couple. Khan got knocked out, he's chinny. There's nothing he can do about that. Saunders quit in the corner against the fighter who really should be a weight class below him, whilst Khan was coming up 2 weight classes.
Amir Khan quit against Terence Crawford as well, so he's done a fair amount of quitting. But I think we can sit there. Well, the thing is, Billy Joe Saunders scraped a couple of rounds, but equally that's his boxing style. We've seen him fight knowing that was essentially what he was going to do, and he was, you know, you're not going to ask him to fight differently. I don't think. I think Amir Khan, you can go, okay, he didn't necessarily quit, but equally, was it a contest to you? Like the Saunders one, even on the judging, was closer, I think, than some people would necessarily expected. Amir Khan, again, you give it a couple of rounds, but you can't say it was close given how it ended. It wasn't, and you can sit there and go, even with the Callum Smith versus say Amir Khan, the approach that Canelo would take, the seriousness that he would take, approaching it in training, and even the tactics involved. Just let Amir Khan have a couple of rounds and then banjo, which essentially is what happened.
He didn't let him have a couple of rounds. He was trying to win. How do you know how Canelo approached them?
I just think if a guy's moving up 2 weight classes in any sport, if you're moving up like that, you know you've got power advantages, don't you? Like, is Amir Khan a big puncher? Not necessarily. So you know that he's probably not going to stop him, so he's going to have to outpoint him. But you've also, I mean, who did he stop? Le Greco, Billy Dibb after he fought Canelo? Like, these aren't like names you're sitting around going, that's going to cause.
We're discussing how they performed against Canelo.
Sorry?
We're discussing how they performed against Canelo.
But we're discussing Amir Khan overall, and obviously, if you're going to sit there and go, Amir Khan's he's got decent victories, obviously, against, you know, the likes of an old Zab Judah and Paulie Malignaggi, but
this is irrelevant. None of this is relevant.
Of course, it's relevant because if you're Canelo, you're going, well, he's going to move up. I'm moving up against a guy who's not necessarily got power, but he's moving up 2 weight classes. So is he going to stop me? Is he going to stop Canelo? No. Do you think he was going to stop Canelo at any point?
No. But right, we're discussing how they performed. Khan
okay,
was...
so Saunders lasting more rounds and having fractured eye socket.
Let me finish.
Is a less of a performance than Amir Khan being stretched out of the ring, essentially.
No. Let me finish. Right, we're discussing how they performed. Khan was up on the cards, up and got stopped in 6. Saunders was down in the cards and quit in 8. and you're saying that is the second best Saunders, and Can is the second worst.
I think, because I think in that Saunders fight, there was more intrigue than what happened in the Amir Khan fight.
We're all about the performance. We're not all about the intrigue or anything, or who you thought had more of a chance. We're all about on the night who put in a better showing.
And well, until in your words, not my words, but until Saunders allegedly quit,
Allegedly,
he was of course he was performing better. He was still in the fight. It was an awkward fight for Canelo. He won a few rounds.
Can had won more rounds in less time than Saunders did in that night.
Look, Danny, I fundamentally, you might have to jump in here because I am going to need similar gas and air to what Amir Khan did if this continues. But I just cannot foresee. It's like, okay, would you, in the same point then, would you say that Kell Brook put in a good performance against Triple G? Is that, would you say that Dave Allen put in a good performance?
I'm not saying they were great performances. None of the Brit's performances against Canelo's were great. We're ranking them against each other.
No, we are. It is relative, yeah. So I agree with you, but equally, I still, in my opinion, think that Benny Joe Saunders performed better, considering the awkwardness that he presented against Canelo, and the fact that I genuinely think the fight between Khan and Canelo played out, I think, in many ways, as a lot of people expected. Whether or not he won a few rounds.
Canelo and Saunders fight. So did the Canelo Saunders fight.
You expected Saunders to quit?
I expected him to get stopped in the mid to late rounds, and he did.
Okay. Well, what happened? What did you expect for Khan versus Canelo?
To get stopped. I didn't expect Khan to have the anywhere near the success he had. He was comprehensively outboxing Canelo, like piecing him up at stages, where Saunders fiddled his way to a couple of rounds.
Wow.
I'm really enjoying the debate, but we've unfortunately not got all afternoon. But good shift by both of you. I'm not going to say there's a winner. I think both of you have provided good points. I also don't think either of you are going to agree with each other. So we're just gonna move on. Second point, Callum Smith. I think it's fair to talk about. Eliot, I know you've been a critic of Callum Smith in the past, quite openly. You've got him at number 5 on your list. Danny, you've got him number 7 on your list. Eliot, just thoughts on Danny having him at near the bottom of his list compared to you having him in the middle of your list.
No, I'm not going to criticize Danny for getting stuck into Callum Smith, even whether it's relative or not. To be perfectly honest with you, I'd love nothing more than to continually shovel shit onto Callum Smith. But I think I've got him obviously a little bit higher, just because we're not going to. Fielding has to be at the bottom. Obviously, we've talked our point about Amir Khan. We won't talk over that. The reason I put him above Liam Smith was just because he essentially lost. I thought Liam Smith actually, like you said, had more intent, to be quite honest. So if we're judging it on that fact, fair enough. But again, he was down twice before he got stopped. So I put Callum Smith just in there because, frankly, he went the distance. But don't get me wrong, like I'm not saying he performed well in any way. I think it was an embarrassing performance from someone with such physical advantages and alleged power. But equally, as I've said before, I don't actually rate Callum Smith necessarily as highly as a lot of other people have. I think with the CV that I've said before, the Groves that he fought was, washed and injured. He lost to John Ryder, and he was a beat Hassan Dam. So fair. That's kind of how in my mind how Callum Smith is. But yeah, I mean, what did the judges have it? 11-1, I think, for him, and 9-3. I mean, that's probably generous. I think 11-1 is fair enough. But yeah, it was a bad performance. So frankly, if Danny stuck him down at 7, actually, I've got no argument. Frankly, I'd stick him down at 9 if I could. But if there was other people that was relative.
One difference here is you've got, compared to his brother Liam Smith, you've got Liam Smith at 4. Sorry, Danny's got Liam Smith at 4 and Callum Smith at 7. Eliot, you've actually got Liam Smith at 6 and Callum Smith at 5. So you've got Liam Smith lower than Callum Smith. Why have you got Smith? Obviously got stopped. Callum Smith didn't. Why have you got Liam Smith lower down than Callum Smith? Just by one mark.
Just simply, really, because Danny made I suppose a point which I actually support his in the fact that Liam Smith did actually cut Canelo, which is fair play. But it's just the fact that also he himself was cut and was dropped twice and then stopped. Like, I didn't think it was necessarily that close. I mean, that didn't happen to Callum Smith. Don't get me wrong. He boxed terribly, was very negative and looked to make the end and moaned about his elbow, but he didn't get dropped or hurt in the same way. So that's simply the reason why I put him one higher, frankly.
Fair enough. Danny, just your comments on Elliot Grigg having Callum Smith at number 5 on his list.
It is subjective. Like, he's put sort of emphasis on him here in the final bell, which obviously, if we're going back to the Liam Smith thing, he didn't. But just like, I have Smith below Hatton and Rhodes because like they both went in there. Say, well, obviously Rhodes got stopped in the 12th. Hatton heard the final bell, but barely won a round. Maybe could give them a share of one. But the reason I have Smith lower is, as I touched on, like every physical advantage in the world going into the fight, and people were actually giving him a bit of a chance. And after a couple of rounds, he just had the fight beaten out of him. And whilst we come back to the comparison with his brother Liam did get stopped, and as Elliot says, dropped a couple of times before it. Like, he came with ambition, and at some point Canelo was concerned about the fight, I would imagine, and thinks I'm in a fight here, whereas it was complete one-way traffic, like against Callum Smith. And like, giving people points and ranking them higher for hearing the final bell, like that's what journeymen are there to do. When they hear the final bell, like they should be there to win, like it's Canelo. But yeah, I wouldn't like. I'm not. It's not something I would argue greatly. I mean, like, it's sort of black and white. He did hear the final bell. Other fighters in this didn't. So, and that is something to hold. But it's about the optics of the fight and the sort of the problems I feel watching the fight they caused Canelo, and I think Callum Smith caused absolutely none, and was probably the most disappointing performance. I mean, take aside maybe Rocky Fielding and the whole list, given in terms of what we were expecting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're running out of time here, but one thing I think it's interesting to discuss is expectation here as well. I think there was some people, including myself, thought Callum Smith had a chance of beating Canelo, and for them to lose pretty much every round was disappointing. And compared to like Liam Smith or Rocky Fielding or Amir Khan, I'm not sure you had that many people who actually thought they were going to go and do it. So that's just a small point I'm going to make. Elliot, Grigg, just going to round things off here. I think one final difference I'm seeing in the two lists is Elliot has Matthew Hatton quite a long time ago fighting Canelo, and you've got him at number 3. Danny, you've got him at number 5. Taking the bronze medal position in your list, Elliot, why have you got Matthew Hatton at 3?
I've got Matthew Hatton at 3 because he, again, was coming towards the end of his career by the time he fought Canelo. I think he had, I suppose, the names on his list after that. He had a UD loss, didn't he, to Kell Brook. And I just think, like, again, it wasn't his natural weight fighting Canelo up, I think 150 at that point, and he was, obviously lower. He's actually more naturally suited to the weight class of Amir Khan and managed to go the distance. That's why I put him up at 3. But I think you've got him with 17 KOs, 43 fights. No real power attribute there. Kind of a mismatch, frankly. So I've given him credit. I suppose Danny's obviously has said, and fair play, it seems to be judging it against intention. And I'm essentially, I suppose, judging it more for survival. Like, you're sitting there going, like, it's for Canelo, even at that time. I mean, I'm old, new guy, so my memory was sharper then. But it was like, it was a low risk sort of fight for him even at that time. Like, no one really gave Matthew Hatton a chance. He wasn't at that level. Moved up a bit, went the distance. Canelo obviously outboxed him, was kind of to be expected, but equally, like, you could kind of expect him to get starched. So that's why I kind of put him up there, just because it was frankly a gross mismatch. And he managed to see the bell on someone that wasn't even his level and didn't have the power or the attributes to hold him off. Unlike Callum Smith, which is again why I put him up there, because he didn't even have the capacity, physicality to actually do anything to Canelo, frankly.
Fair enough. And Danny, just gonna close things off with you, just your reasoning for having Hatton down at 5 and your reaction to Hatton being at number 3 on Elliot's list.
5 is actually pretty good in my list when you consider the fighters he's above. Like, I would give him the best of the people who heard the distance and done nothing else. So, like, that's as high as I can have it. But you have to, like, fight, you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, he showed more ambition than Callum Smith, which is why I have him above him. But, like, if you're not winning a round, like, not any, like, problems, and this wasn't the prime, like, it's a fair point Elliot makes on that it was towards the end of Matthew Hatton's career, but it was nowhere near the version of Canelo Alvarez that was fighting the likes of Khan, Saunders, Ryder, Liam Smith even. It was what, Canelo 22, 21, around that age, and nothing like the beast he is now for one reason or another. So, like, it's definitely commendable to hear the final bell, but if you're ranking it in terms of, like, the best performance, I think I'm being very generous having him 5.
Fair enough. We're going to leave things there. but it's been really interesting, something a bit different for us. Probably the most heated video I've been in since the Tyson Fury / Dillian White big fight breakdown, which Elliot Green was also in.
Who was right on that video?
completely fair. Gents, we are, I think we'll leave it there. Maybe if Canelo fights Joshua Buatsi in a couple of years or something, we'll do another video and place Joshua Buatsi somewhere on the list when he loses to Canelo as well. But yeah, it's been good to discuss this with both of you, and yeah, that's it. Thanks both of you for your time.
Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Scotty, for comparing.